Chicago is a city that learned long ago how to rise above disaster, literally. On the surface, you see gleaming glass towers, the clatter of the L, the wide shoulders of Wacker Drive. But drop below the noise for a moment, and you'll find doorways that open onto brick walls, windows staring into solid earth, and whole streets buried like fossils beneath their younger selves. Tonight, we're peeling back those layers to uncover the other Chicago, the one built in the shadows of cholera, fire, and ambition. Back in the 1850s, Chicago had a problem no amount of Midwestern grit could fix. The city sat almost level with Lake Michigan. Rainwater pooled in the streets, sewage ran straight into basements, and waves of cholera swept through the population. Engineers proposed something wild: lift the entire downtown up to 14 feet. And that's exactly what they did. Over the next decade, teams of men slipped iron screwjacks beneath brick hotels, saloons, and whole blocks of row houses, then cranked the handles in unison until the buildings floated like barges on dry land. Businesses stayed open while the ground rose beneath their customers' feet. Bartenders kept pouring as the floor climbed inch by inch. When the dust settled, the new street level was set with clean limestone sidewalks, and the original ground floors were left buried, dark, and forgotten. Walk down Lower Wacker today, and you're driving through that 19th century ghost level. Look closely at alley walls in the loop, and you'll see limestone lintels just above the pavement, old storefront transoms that once faced the sun. Some still carry faded letters: butter and eggs, apothecary, muted out by soot and time. Maintenance workers tell stories of opening a utility hatch and stepping into a room nobody remembered existed. Peeling wallpaper, dusty ledgers, even a cracked mirror catching the glow of their headlamps. Then came October 8, 1871. A lantern tips in a barn, maybe. The Great Chicago Fire rips across the city, turning 3 square miles into a kiln. Wooden sidewalks burn like fuses, and the raised streets, now dry and airy, feed the flames. When it's over, the new Chicago rises from the ashes, but the fire's debris is shoveled into the gaps below the streets and along the riverbanks. Archaeologists still find half-melted bottles and scorched cobblestones beneath today's foundations, sealed in a layer of charcoal as black as midnight on the lake. Yet the city kept stacking history on itself. In the 1890s, construction crews digging footings for the auditorium building encountered an entire cellar from a hotel lost in the fire, charred beams, iron bed frames, and trunks of clothing perfectly preserved in ash. Rather than excavate, they simply poured concrete over the relics and built their opera house on top. Somewhere under the orchestra pit, a Victorian skeleton of board and brick still sleeps, but the strangest reminders sit in plain sight along the river. At Kinsey and Franklin, an abandoned section of wooden wharf juts out beneath the current street grade. Splashing water laps against timbers hammered in place before the Civil War. Above, commuters cross the bridge without knowing they're 50 feet above a drowned shoreline where longshoremen once unloaded barrels of beef and grain. Not all the buried past stays quiet. Every spring, the ground heaves with frost, and bricks from extinct sidewalks pop through the asphalt like fossils pushed up by time. City crews call them ghost pavers. They gather the squared-off red blocks, stack them on pallets, and haul them away before repaving. Some end up as garden edging in suburban yards, souvenirs of a Chicago that doesn't officially exist. Step into some of the older basements along Canal Street, and you'll notice an architectural oddity: arched sandstone walls running parallel to the foundation. Those aren't decorative. They're the original 1840s river embankments, now entombed in concrete. Contractors call them inside-outside walls, a riddle only Chicago could write. Build a city, bury it, build another on top, then forget where the seams run. This layered beginning sets the stage for everything else lurking below: the freight tunnels, the ghost stations, the secret breweries, the million-gallon storm caverns. Chicago survives by swallowing its own past, repurposing the bones, and pretending the stomach is empty. Ready to descend? Let's open the first hidden door and take the stairs down. The first hidden door swings inward, and suddenly the air smells like cold limestone and machine oil. We're 40 feet under the loop, walking a corridor no wider than a boxcar, its brick walls sweating history. This is the Chicago Freight Tunnel System, 60 miles of subterranean track laced beneath downtown like veins under skin. Construction started in 1899. Crews armed with pickaxes and steam shovels bored a lattice of two-track passageways 7 feet high, just enough to let a narrow-gauge electric locomotive haul coal to office boilers and lug department store packages back to the surface. In its heyday, the tunnel moved everything from typewriters to fresh milk, all out of sight all night long. City fathers bragged it kept the streets above free of horse carts and soot. Then came cheap trucking and cleaner fuels. By 1959, the tiny trains clattered to a halt. The switchboards went silent, and the tunnels were sealed with little more than wooden planks and optimism. For 3 decades, no one thought about them. Until one chilly April morning in 1992, when a construction crew sinking a river piling punched a coffee cup-sized hole in a tunnel wall beneath the Chicago River. Within hours, murky water poured through abandoned passages, surged up elevator shafts, and drowned basements from Merchandise Mart to the Board of Trade. Damage, roughly $2 billion. Cause, a tunnel the city had forgotten it owned. Chicago had quite literally flooded itself with its own past. Today, security gates bar most entrances, but maintenance lights still glow down there. Urban utility workers whisper about hearing distant metallic clinks. Ghost trains or just rivets settling? No one's sure. Every few blocks, a steel hatch on the sidewalk marks a ladder straight into that maze. Commuters hustle past, never guessing the floor beneath their sneakers is hollow. Ride the red line south from Roosevelt and press your face to the glass. For a heartbeat, the tunnel widens into a dim cavity. Columns, tiled walls, no advertisements, no people. Those are service rooms and a never-opened lower mezzanine carved in the 1940s for an express transfer concept that stalled. CTA crews stash equipment there now, but the fluorescent tubes still flicker occasionally, and passengers swear they've seen a figure standing alone behind the safety fence, vanishing as the train roars by. Ghost spaces haunt the Blue Line too. Under LaSalle and Congress sits an unused mezzanine, sealed since the Cold War when officials imagined it doubling as a fallout shelter. Farther north lies Block 37's infamous Superstation, a gleaming concrete cavity dug in 2006 for a high-speed airport train that the budget axed before a single rail was laid. 18 years later, the unfinished platforms linger, $400 million worth of echo chamber, waiting for a future that keeps missing its stop. The idea of a super subway isn't new. In the 1960s, planners drafted the Central Area Transit Project, a ring of deep-bore tubes linking the loop's west side to Streeterville with sleek express trains. Crews even started 2 stub tunnels beneath Lake and Dearborn, long concrete throats that disappear into darkness behind steel doors. If you work late in certain lower loop basements, you can feel a faint vibration underfoot at odd hours. A ventilation fan cycling on to keep the dormant passages from molding into oblivion. Railroads in Chicago don't always die quietly. Grand Central Station, a Richardsonian Romanesque giant crowned by a 247-foot clock tower, handled 12 million passengers a year before its 1971 demolition. Urban explorers believe fragments of its foundations and approach tracks still lie entombed beneath West Loop office towers, occasionally snagging drill bits like bones interrupting a grave robber. Not far away, under the Luxembourg-sized roof of the old post office, lies a tangle of mail platforms where railway post office clerks sorted letters on rolling trains until 1960. The building's recent remodel turned some of those ramps into chic pedestrian corridors, but sealed stairwells still drop to track level, locked behind welded grates. Dusty chalkboards list train numbers that haven't whistled since Eisenhower was president. These forgotten rails knit together a subterranean atlas of intention and abandonment. Technology that sprinted ahead of its own era, business plans eclipsed by recessions, political dreams derailed by wars. Chicago doesn't erase these experiments. It entombs them and builds the next bright idea on top, always layering, never leveling. And if you think corporate coal trains and silent subway shells are eerie, wait until you meet the people who use the darkness for less civic purposes. Legend has it that a narrow corridor once angled from uptown toward the Lexington Hotel, Al Capone's headquarters, providing an escape route or smuggling lane. Blueprints list a service corridor under South Michigan, but no modern survey has mapped it in 90 years. In Part 3, we'll follow the scent of contraband and discover how Chicago's underworld took that word literally, turning basements into speakeasies and escape hatches into empire. Grab a flashlight. The next staircase is steep. The freight tunnel dust is still on our boots when we push through an unmarked service door behind the Green Mill Cocktail Lounge. Uptown's traffic hushes. In its place comes the slow drip of condensation and the faint smell of rye that once soaked these bricks. Legend says Al Capone could slip out of the lounge mid-raid, duck through this cellar, and pop up 2 buildings south in a barber chair. Whether he ever made that sprint is debatable, but the passage itself is real. 12 paces long, arched in yellow Chicago common brick, just wide enough for a man with a violin case or a Tommy gun. Capone was hardly the only bootlegger to burrow beneath the city. During Prohibition, thirsty Chicagoans carved a second social network in the limestone. Basement bars linked by trap doors, dumbwaiters that whisked gin to ground floor soda fountains, and crawl spaces wide enough for a quick handshake with a bribe beat cop. One of the better documented routes ran under Clark Street, connecting today's Exchequer pub to the long-vanished Forum Cafe, a bricked-up concrete corridor once lit by bare bulbs and, rumor insists, financed with Southside O'Banion money. Bartenders say you can still feel a cooler breeze near the back booths, as if the tunnel still breathes. Farther south, the Lexington Hotel once lorded over South Michigan like a brick fortress. When developers gutted the place in 1986, they uncovered walled-off wine crates, ledgers coded in neat Italian handwriting, and a narrow shaft descending below the boiler room. Urban explorer lore claims that shaft once linked to a steam tunnel running toward the Illinois Central Tracks, perfect for moving contraband under the noses of rail police. Before historians could test the tale, contractors entombed the shaft in concrete, leaving another Capone footnote sealed in gray silence. Not every hidden cellar served gangsters. Some became reliquaries of tragedy. On 24 July 1915, the SS Eastland capsized at dock, taking 844 lives in the worst Great Lakes disaster on record. Legend claims the nearest large building, the old Chicago Historical Society on Dearborn, was commandeered as a makeshift morgue. That Romanesque hulk still stands at Clark in Ontario, later reborn as Excalibur nightclub. Staff from its club days remember ice-cold pockets where no duct runs and glassware leaping from shelves as if slapped by invisible hands. Patrons swore they saw a woman in 1910s, dressed drifting near the stairwell, before dissolving like lake fog in strobe light. Today, the building hosts a sleek restaurant, but the sub-basement remains mostly untouched, its brick walls whitewashed since 1915, as though the city is trying to bleach out memory. Across town in Pilsen, the defunct Schoenhofen Brewery hides another labyrinth. Brewery tunnels were common in the 19th century. They kept lager cool before refrigeration. Schoenhofen's cellars plunge 40 feet, lined with vaulted brick and glazed tile that still beads with moisture. Urban explorers speculate a sealed side passage once connected to the freight tunnel network, a handy pipeline for suds when beer became contraband. The city welded entrances shut after 2 high schoolers got lost in 2001. But the echo of dripping water carries through ventilation grates on Canalport Avenue, reminding passers-by the barrels may be gone, yet the bones of the operation endure. Even the law carved its own secret corridors. At the Criminal Courts Complex on 26th in California, a narrow tunnel threads beneath the street, ferrying inmates between Cook County Jail and the courthouse away from cameras and escape attempts. Reporters who've descended the passage describe flaking paint, iron bars frozen with rust, and penciled graffiti dating back to the 1950s. Names, dates, and desperate prayers. Court officers still march high-profile defendants through that gloom each morning, a ritual echo of chain gangs long abolished above ground. Then there are the places where history sinks so deep it feels supernatural. Take Marge's Still in Old Town. Licensed today, but born as a speakeasy in 1885. Its cellar tunnel, hand-dug to a neighboring butcher shop, once smuggled cast beneath cobblestone. Patrons report a sudden waft of cigar smoke even when the bar's dark, followed by the creak of floorboards overhead. Impossible, because the ceiling is poured concrete. Whether it's spectral bootleggers pacing their nightly route, or just imagination primed by bourbon, the effect is the same. You glance at the floor, half expecting a trap door to swing wide. All these stories, Capone's escape lanes, Eastland's restless dead, breweries bricked in time, share a moral as hard as the limestone they're carved from. Chicago solves problems by digging, hiding, and moving forward. We bury what shames us, entomb what thrills us, and let rumor do the rest. But not everything underground stays still. Vibrations from the L, new condo foundations, even the rumble of Lakeshore Drive keeps stirring the silt of the past. Sometimes a brick pops loose, a wall seeps old beer, or a tourist snaps a photo of a tunnel where the city insists no tunnel should be. Our flashlight beam flickers. Maybe the battery's dying, or maybe the room just swallowed the light for a second. Either way, it's time to leave the whispering corridors and step into something bigger, stranger, and far more engineered. Because directly beneath Chicago's suburbs yawns a man-made canyon large enough to swallow Soldier Field, an underground river system built to stop the next biblical flood. In Part 4, we'll descend hundreds of feet into the deep tunnel, trace the bones of 19th century sewers, and emerge in the pedway where today's commuters drift like ghosts of the future. Don't pocket the flashlight yet. You're gonna need it. The flashlight is barely a match for the darkness that waits beneath suburban Hodgkins. But an elevator the size of a two-car garage rattles us 300 feet down anyway. The doors sigh apart and a cold wind rolls in, thick with the mineral smell of ancient limestone. We've arrived in a cathedral no one was meant to worship in. The tunnel and reservoir plan, tarp to engineers, the deep tunnel to everyone else. Picture a subway tube wide enough for a semi-truck, running for 109 miles in total, carved by 12-story-tall, boring machines that chewed through bedrock like mechanical earthworms. When spring storms lash Chicago, billions of gallons of sewer overflow roar through this system instead of spilling into the river, a subterranean river redirecting disaster. The main stem here is 28 feet in diameter, lit by orange sodium lamps that make the water below gleam like molten bronze. Stand quietly and you can hear it breathing. A slow gurgle that rises and fades as pumps send the mix to Stickney, the largest wastewater plant on Earth. A Metropolitan Water Reclamation District crew chief points to chalk marks high on the wall. That's where the flood peaked last July. It's 12 feet above our heads. The scale is hard to grasp until a maintenance cart trundles past with its headlights lost in the curve, a toy swallowed by a python. TARP was conceived after two back-to-back calamities: the 1967 Valentine's Day blizzard that flooded basements across the South Side, and the raw sewage deluge of 1969 that left the river stinking like an open latrine. Voters approved the project in 1972, the same year Deep Throat rattled Washington. Chicago, true to form, chose a different kind of deep throat, one that would gulp rainstorms instead of secrets. Phase 1 bored the main tunnels. Phase 2 hollowed out giant reservoirs from old quarries in Lemont and Thornton. Together, they can hold 17 billion gallons, enough to drown the loop under 50 feet of water if it were above ground. Yet the deep tunnel is only the newest layer in Chicago's plumbing matryoshka. Walk a little farther south in the main stem, and a side adit branches off, suddenly shrinking to a brick arch no taller than a man. That's an 1890s combined sewer, still in service, built when horses ruled the streets, and every drop of filth headed straight for the lake. The arch bricks are black slick with a century of flow, the mortar eroded into runnels that read like tree rings of urban waste. Coal soot, ash, grease, penicillin, microplastics, time stacked as grime. The Victorian engineers who laid these bricks never imagined they'd one day empty into a concrete canyon so vast you could launch a barge inside it. We surfaced downtown through a service shaft and stepped directly into the pedway, Chicago's legal underworld. Here the smell changes from limestone to popcorn and perfume. Fluorescent corridors link more than 40 blocks of the loop. City Hall, Macy's, CTA stations, food courts, hidden bars, even a skating rink in winter. Cubicle warriors slip through these tunnels to fetch lunch without facing February wind, their footsteps echoing off terrazzo you could eat off, never guessing that 30 stories below them, TARP is rerouting a river of stormwater. The pedway feels tame after the deep tunnel, but it shares the same DNA, a Chicago instinct to solve problems by burrowing. Keep walking east and you'll hit the Millennium Station mezzanine, where violin music drifts up from buskers who treat the concourse like an amphitheater. Pause and listen. The melody reverberates through ductwork, sneaks into ventilation shafts, and slides down maintenance ladders until, impossibly, a faint echo arrives in the deep tunnel hours later. Workers claim they sometimes hear music riding the air currents when storms have forced them to stay overnight. Maybe it's imagination, maybe it's physics, but it's a reminder that every layer of the city, from subway to sewer to storm cavern, is connected by pockets of sound and wind. Above ground, tourists snap selfies by the shiny bean in Millennium Park, unaware that 60 feet beneath their sneakers lies the South Water Street Freight Tunnel, abandoned since 1959 and sealed behind a wall of concrete. Another 20 feet down flows a 19th century sewer. Another 120 feet down, the deep tunnel waits. The vertical stratigraphy is absurd. Art, freight, filth, salvation, each stacked like chapters in a history book nobody thought to bind. Chicago's genius and its curse has always been this. When confronted with fire, flood, or prohibition, it doesn't retreat, it digs. Raise the streets, carve new tunnels, bury the guilt, build the future on top. That reflex saves the city again and again, but it also leaves ghost infrastructure humming in the dark, half remembered by blueprints and urban legends. Someday the deep tunnel itself will become obsolete, and a grandchild of TARP will plunge even deeper, sealing these concrete arteries behind another layer of progress. For now, though, the system holds. A summer cloudburst can dump 3 inches of rain in an hour, and Chicagoans up on the surface barely notice. Maybe a flooded viaduct here, a stalled cab there. While down below, valves thunder open and reservoirs swallow a small lake. When the storm passes, pumps lift the brew to daylight, microbes chew it clean, and it flows back to the river clearer than the water settlers found 2 centuries ago. Our journey ends where most Chicago days begin. The Randolph-Wabash Pedway stairwell, sunlight slanting through the grate overhead. Climb those steps and you break the surface like a diver, blinking at the skyline. Now every honkin' L train screech sounds different, layered, richer. You know there are coal rails under the sidewalks, ghost stations behind tiled walls, speakeasy cellars under corner bars, and a storm leviathan coiled 300 feet below the suburbs, waiting for the next deluge. Look down at the pavement one last time. Somewhere beneath that concrete, a brick pops loose, a limestone arch sighs, a tunnel light flickers. Chicago never really sleeps. It just keeps adding chapters underground. The next time thunder rattles the windows, remember the city is flipping a switch far below, turning on a river you'll never see. One more secret hiding under Chicago.